So I know how much you guys like to see things peeled off of the sides of cases, and oh my goodness, look at the fingerprints. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back. I decided to do this video after all because I said I was going to show the new build, and might as well go ahead and do it. And so the only way that I knew how to start this video was to actually finally peel the plastic that has been sitting on that case since I built this computer a few weeks ago. Again, if you missed the previous video where I talk about my mom's computer build and what the experience was like building in the Meshify C, my normal camera isn't working, so we are using an alternative method, and that alternative method is webcams. Not the most elegant thing in the world, but hey, it works. So without further ado, and there is the new build, and all of the RGB lighting that you could possibly want in a system. Again, not something that I've really shied away from in recent years, but it is definitely something that I enjoy. And I think RGB lighting done in an elegant manner looks fantastic. And I think that this case really exemplifies how RGB lighting should look. And so this is the new build. It is based around Intel's Coffee Lake platform. This is an 8700K. The motherboard, though, is a Z390 board. It is the Maximus 11 code. I know the first thing that some of you are going to do are start screaming about VRMs and power phases and all that other stuff, but trust me when I tell you, this thing is overclocked, and VRM temperatures are not an issue. There are no issues with temperature whatsoever. You also can see this is my first go with a custom water loop. It is soft tubing. I know there are people out there who are going, oh my God, soft tubing is the worst. You should hardline. And I wasn't dealing with the hardline tubing. So quick rundown of the parts. Obviously 8700K. It is overclocked to 5 gigahertz across all cores. It is running at about 1.33 volts in the BIOS, but it typically shows up at 1.3 to 1.31. So I think I need to do some more load line calibration tweaking, or just drop the voltage and whatever. I'm still tinkering with that part a little bit. It is on, as I mentioned, the Asus Maximus 11 code motherboard. The boot drive is a Samsung 960 Evo 500 gig drive. Excuse me. Memory is G.Skill Trident Z black and white memory at 3200 megahertz. It's a 32 gig kit. We also have two Samsung 860 Evo 1 terabyte drives, a 4 terabyte Seagate Barracuda from my previous build. Obviously the graphics card. If you've been following me on social media for a little bit, you know about the card that I won through Asus Elite Rewards. This is the GTX 1080. It is the Strix version. It is also part of the custom loop. The power supply, Corsair RM1000X. And of course, we are cooling with a custom water loop. This is all EK parts. It is an EK Velocity CPU block. It is the nickel and acetal. Same with the GPU block, same metals. We are using soft tubing with the compression fittings from EK. We have a 360 millimeter radiator up top with 3 120 millimeter EK Vardar fans. Now those fans have 3 digital Phanteks Halos RGB fan frames on them. And then the front radiator is a 280 mil radiator. It has a pair of 140 millimeter Vardar fans. We have an EK reservoir pump combination because what I wanted to do wasn't going to work. We also have 3 LED strips in this system. There's one in the back you can't see. That's above the cable management area. There's obviously the one in the front up top, and then one in the back underneath the motherboard to provide some underglow lighting. And of course, there is another digital fan frame on the 140 millimeter exhaust fan, also Phanteks. And all the Phanteks products are addressable. So that's one of the fun things. There is RGB lighting on the motherboard, but it's very subdued. In fact, the only areas you can really typically see are the Republic of Gamers text above the graphics card, as well as the lighting above, right by the start and reset, the power and reset buttons that are underneath the Q code. Other than that, it's pretty subdued. It's overpowered pretty much by all the other lighting effects in the build. We also have custom cables from Cable Mod. It's the Pro Series. It is the carbon color. I think it looks pretty fantastic. And right now it's pretty much Christmas colors. But I don't like doing that blinky stuff, so I'm actually using the case control for the case and the fan frame lighting and that back bottom LED strip. So that's actually being run by the Evolv X case RGB controller. And I'm going to talk about this case a little bit in this video. So this one might run a little bit long because I was going to do a video over an overview of the build and the performance I was getting, and then I was going to do another video on the Evolv X because there are some things to talk about there. So I was just going to originally talk about those things and then do 2 separate videos, but we're going to combine them into one because I'm sad about my camera, and it's probably going to be a while before I can get a new one because the cheapest one that I would be willing to get is about $900, and I've spent way too much money on computer parts. So overall performance on this system, if you want to know what you're going to get out of an 8700K, well, at stock, we're talking a Cinebench score of 1410, and you saw temperatures kind of get up into the 60s and near 70 with the EVGA cooler. I didn't do a lot of testing under the closed loop cooler that I initially built the system with. That was just a placeholder until I could do the custom loop. But once the loop was in, we saw a max temperature of about 52 degrees Celsius in Cinebench. A real hard stress test will push the temperatures to near 70. But again, this is a delitted 8700K running at 5 gigahertz. So I think that temperature is pretty acceptable. The graphics card will max out at about 50 under a real intense gaming load, but typically idles around 30. My idle temperatures are up a little bit. They're usually mid to upper 30s, but that is because ambient room temperature is up there. This room gets warm. It just always has been, and I usually have, it's 35 degrees outside right now, and I have a window open right now. The idle temperatures aren't important in a build like this, though, because with it being custom, with a custom water loop in it, we're more concerned about the max temperatures and noise. And this system never ramps up. It never kicks into another gear because I have the fans running at about 40 to 45%, and they're not designed to kick it up until they hit 70. Temperatures never stay at 70 degrees Celsius long enough for the fans to ever kick up. So even at full load, this is how the system sounds. You can't really hear it. And so that's probably my favorite part about the custom water loop. It was a challenging endeavor. It took a while to do. I made some mistakes early on, but I kind of recovered, and there's a couple of tubes that I could probably shorten up a little bit, but all in all, I'm pretty satisfied with how it looks, and it's performing the way I want it to. So again, can't really complain too much there. Memory is at its XMP profile. I hit some instability when using the second XMP profile, so I backed it off to the first. I can get this processor up to 5.1 gigahertz, but it requires 1.41 volts, and the gains in Cinebench are like 30 points. I think the overclock Cinebench score at stock, I said it was 1410. Overclocked, it's usually about 1630 to 1646. So the 5 gigahertz overclock works pretty well because this CPU under stock conditions will boost to 4.7. So 300 megahertz gives you 200 points. The graphics card, it has an overclock on it as well. It is plus 120 on the boost clock. It will get up to about 2038. I could get it to 2050 occasionally, but there were some random occasional crashes, so I backed it off another tick. I don't have the memory overclocked as high. Every other card I've played with, I can get 1,000 on the memory. I've only done 450 so far, but I mean, we're talking a 1080 Ti underwater. Performance is not an issue on any games at 3440 by 1440 with the highest settings. We're 90 to 100 frames per second across pretty much every title. The build was pretty smooth. If you've seen the live stream footage that is up on the channel, It didn't take me too long to do the initial build. It was about 2 to 2.5 hours. Pretty straightforward. I like the Evolv X in that it is very spacious. There's a lot of room to work with. The removable bracket up top for radiator support and fan support is a nice feature. And they've done just so many good things with this case. So many things that are improvements over the original. The hinged door is probably my favorite improvement. The front panel removes much easier. In the Phanteks Evolv, the removal of the panel wasn't difficult, but it was 4 prongs in the corners, and sometimes took a little bit of effort to get it up. This time there's 2 prongs in the top, but there's feet, basically. There's slots that there are 2 slots, whatever you want to call them, that you put these notches into, and then you push it in up at the top and it latches into place. There is lighting in the front. You can't really see it from this angle, but there is lighting going down the front of the panel that is matching the rear fan and the strips on the bottom. Once you pull that front panel away, though, the lights shut off. There's a magnetic dust filter this time. The Phanteks Evolv, if you've had one, you know that it's another one of it clips on. This one in here in the Evolv X is magnetic, so that's another improvement. Because this front panel is pushed out more, the airflow is so much better in this case. You can get your fingers in here, and you couldn't do that on the Phanteks Evolv. You couldn't come close to that. So the airflow is better. They did a nice job there. I think they still could have put some more mesh in the front to really improve airflow. And the same thing with the top. They did improve the top vents. They're still a little smaller than I would like, but ultimately the airflow in the system is not bad at all. My Phanteks Evolv has modified panels on it, and this thing runs virtually the same, if not cooler at times, than the old system. The top panel kind of removes differently as well. It doesn't just pull straight up. You have to slide it towards the rear about maybe a centimeter or 2, and then it pulls up and off pretty easily. And for those of you who are using anything less than a 360 millimeter radiator, there is a magnetic cover that you can put over one of the openings to prevent air from recirculating. Radiator support is pretty good though, 360 in the top, 420 in the front. However, thickness of the radiator is important. There are drain ports. There's a drain port in the front. There's a fill port in the top. And overall, they do a nice job. There is a cable management area where they have some covers. There are 2 doors that swing open. Again, the back panel is also tempered glass, and it swings open much the same. And there's a cable management area behind there. I don't have any footage of that because, again, camera, but if you've seen the reviews of this case, you've seen it. It's a nice system. You just have to be careful. There are tabs the plastic tabs that keep the doors closed break very easily, and they're cheap to replace from Phanteks, but you're going to pay I paid $3.50 in shipping to get a replacement out because I broke one of them, but I ordered 4 of them so that if I do it again, I have backups. The cable management area, though, is nice because you can cover all your cables. You don't have to spend a lot of time trying to make it look nice and pretty like the Phanteks Evolv did with the tempered glass. But if you are proud of your cable management, you can take those covers off. These doors, the cable management covers, they are on hinges that you can just lift the doors off of to make things much easier. The doors also, the cable management covers also act as your SSD storage. You can mount 3 on each door. I wouldn't advise it. I've seen a number of reports of people breaking their SATA connections because of the way the doors close. It's a nice idea, but it's not executed very well. However, you might have to do that unless you can squeeze all the drive cages that they send you into the bottom, because there is support in the bottom for up to 4 hard drive caddies that they do give you. But if you have a power supply, a full-size power supply, and all those cables back there, you're really only going to be really able to get 2 of those in. They do stack on top, so that does help. But again, you're probably not going to get more than 2. The 4 idea is nice, but I think that's not going to be very practical for people, especially if you have the stiffer cables. It's just not going to work. but it is a pretty easy system to install the cages into, the hard drives into. I am only using one back there because luckily I had a solution to one of the biggest complaints I have about this case, and that is they do not give you any SSD sleds. They have three mounting points in the back for SSDs, but they do not give you any sleds. That is probably the biggest gripe I have with this case. It's a $200 case that does not have any accessories other than that magnetic cover, the 4 full-size hard drive caddies that go on the bottom, and a GPU sag bar that you can install on the back to prevent GPU sags, supposedly. I didn't really see it do anything practical, but I don't really know how practical it actually was. And they also give you the mounting point for a GPU riser cable, or for a vertical GPU setup, but you don't get the riser cable, so you can't actually utilize it. They give you the piece that you would put in the bottom to install a riser cable, but they don't give you the riser cable. They don't give you an SSD sled. So there are some pretty serious flaws with accessories. Outside of that, the case is very solid. It's very, very nicely done. They did give you up to 3 different positions for vertical GPU mounting. So for people who have 2-slot, 2.5-slot, 3-slot cards, you can put them in if you buy the optional riser cable sold separately. That's just not the most practical thing. And the thing that I found very interesting was even in the more expensive bundles, they didn't include those things. So some questionable decision making here on the part of Phanteks on their accessories. Again, it's a fantastic looking case. This is the satin black version. Again, the door swinging open is fantastic. That light strip going down the bottom here, I love that detail. But there's one other thing that this design does that you didn't have to worry about in the Phanteks Evolv. So the reason I have the LED strips placed where I placed them is because unlike in the Phanteks Evolv, where you have very defined channels that they will fit in the front and the bottom and even in the rear, there is less space in this case for that. In fact, that panel is flush against the power supply shroud. There is no channel between the power supply shroud and the side panel. And because of this shroud coming the way it does, there's only a little bit of room in the front to try and wedge one in, and there's not really any room by the rear fan. So it pretty much leaves you with the top. And that's really the only place you can get it, and you have to be careful there because like a 360 millimeter radiator is going to push up right against it, and it made it a little interesting. I also had a little bit of trouble getting the motherboard to install properly. It just would not line up with the center standoff that is used to hold the motherboard in place while you screw things in. It was just off. I could not get it to line up. I ended up taking that standoff out and the issue went away. I was able to screw in the motherboard without any issue. So just a couple of things. And that could just be some machining being off by a tick. But ultimately I was able to get around that. Overall, the build wasn't that difficult to do. The most difficult part was the water cooling setup. Once I got the hang of that, I breezed through the last few tubes. In fact, the tube going from the graphics card to the upper radiator to the CPU back to the front radiator were the easiest tubes that I did the entire way. I didn't have any trouble with those. By that point, I had scraped up my fingers enough trying to mess with fittings and such that I kind of got the hang of it. I do like the look of the EK Velocity block. I didn't get the RGB version or Plexi because I just didn't feel like messing with it. I've had too many people tell me that there's a point where you can over tighten with Plexi and crack it, and I just didn't feel like dealing with it. I also didn't want any cables coming from the CPU area. That was one of the big reasons I wanted to do water cooling, and it's one of the reasons why I would consider doing water cooling on the other build. No cables coming from that CPU block just looks so much nicer in there. It's so much easier to manage cables when you don't have a billion cables coming from the pump. The reservoir pump combo was another little bit of a hang up. I wanted to do a separate reservoir and pump, but ultimately the radiator in the front was too thick. I couldn't get the pump situated anywhere that seemed ideal that didn't involve drilling holes somewhere in the case. So that was actually the reason I ended up getting a pump reservoir combo. That one I would probably go back and do the RGB one just because I think that would add a little bit of light over there. But putting that LED strip down at the bottom provided a lot of light underneath. And so I think the build is very nicely lit. I think there's a lot of uniform lighting throughout, and I think it's not too much. I don't do, the whole rainbow thing. Like, I could do this and just listen to everybody go, oh my God, the rainbow puke. But I like that much better. Now, one thing I may try to do here in the near future, I've had some people ask me about AuraSync with addressable lighting. I may do something on that. I don't like the effects in Aura too much. They're very choppy. The case controller does a better job of transitional lighting than AuraSync does, at least in the limited attempts I've made at it. So that was actually why I rerouted some of the connections. Now, the front, this LED strip and the one on the back side are on their own addressable headers. So I could change those to pretty much any effect, any lighting effect that I want. The one in the back is the same color as the Halos rings up top, which are blue right now. So the strip in the back is blue. The one in the front is green. So I have a lot of variety that I can go with colors. I can do a lot of different combinations. And so that was kind of why I was excited to build in this case, because of the addressable RGB functionality. But I ended up separating the case lighting and the rear fan and the back LED strip just because the Phanteks effects were better. If you're wondering though what other effects there are, we've got this. And again, you can change the colors on these. There's a number of different colors. And even white, which I think the rear fan looks actually pretty good white. We've got this kind of a pattern. Let me go ahead and give you a bigger view than that. So there's not a whole lot of variety to it, but let me give you some more looks at the colors. And again, I think the case lighting does a much better job of transitioning. And so I'll do, like I said, I'll probably do something on the AuraSync lighting. The Evolv X is a nice case. I don't have a whole lot of complaints, but again, I wish that they would have included some better accessories, more accessories. It does come, it's equipped with two 140 millimeter fans in the front, a 140 in the rear. The only stock fan that is still in there is the rear fan, as I've taken the two front ones and put them into my mom's PC. And again, all the other fans are EK Vardar fans that I got. They have bulk sales on their website every so often where you can get their fans that have been run in displays for like $10. Really awesome deal. And I know their RGB fans are compatible with AuraSync. So that's something to keep in mind if you are running an Asus motherboard with Aura, that they are compatible. This motherboard, though, I like it because it has an RGB header. It has two addressable RGB headers, has a ton of connections, water pump, AIO pump, multiple fan headers, and just is pretty packed with features. Again, there are people who've made comments about the VRMs, but I've not seen any issues there. And everything is working as I would expect. The system handles just about anything I throw at it. I have not rendered a video on it yet, but I'm hoping to do so soon because I really want to see what the iGPU enhancement does in Adobe Premiere Pro. I think that about covers it though for this video. A look at the build, a look at the Evolv X, and some thoughts I had on the Evolv X. Again, I like the case. I think they did some really good improvements, but they also took a step back in a couple of areas. And the whole notion of putting two systems into this build, I think is just absurd. I have no idea why they went that route. There's just not a lot of space to do it. And I think it's more of a headache than anything. If you're going to do a dual system PC, you might as well shell out the money to get a Corsair 1000D, just my 2 cents on that. The case as it is, though, very solid, very sturdy. The panels are as you would expect them to be. And again, I like the doors. I like that you can pull the doors off the hinges to get in better, but to each their own on how they feel about that door system. Overall, impressed. Overall, happy with it. A couple of things I wish they would have done differently. Luckily, I had the Phanteks Evolv. I had 2 SSD sleds I could use to accommodate my 860 Evos. But if you do not have a previous Phanteks Evolv or Phanteks case with those SSD sleds, you're going to want to buy a couple of them. I would not use the cable management doors. I just wouldn't do it. That's just taking too much of a risk. Cable management area, though, is very, very ample. There's a lot of space for it. I don't like that they didn't use rubber grommets, but at the end of the day, it didn't matter because I took all those covers off that they have installed to begin with anyway to accommodate my water cooling setup. So that is a look at my first water-cooled build, my first real high-end gaming PC. Remember, my old build was a 5820K. It was meant to be a rendering and gaming combo, and it does both of them very well, but this processor is actually much better than the 5820K simply because it hits 5 gigahertz and the 5820K maxes out at 4.4. Clock speed does matter in certain applications, which is why I went this route instead of Ryzen. Nothing against Ryzen. I love the Ryzen build I did for my family. Definitely would consider that for a test bench here in the near future. But that is going to be it for this video. It is kind of long. People don't like when I talk too much, but I'm talking about my build and I'm doing basically 2 videos in one here, so sorry. If you have any comments on it, if you have any questions, if you have anything that you would have done differently, let me know in the comments below. If you don't like something about this video, let me know in the comments below. I'm probably not going to be doing too much, though, in terms of tech videos until I get the camera situation situated, because webcams are not the way to go. That's going to do it, though, for this video. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more, make sure you subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.